All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of the Beginner to Master Azul series. Um, a couple of topics I want to talk about before jumping into games today. One is in the last video, there was a situation where I got into some time pressure because, you know, explaining plays as I go and explaining what I'm seeing takes a little more time than kind of just playing and running through things in your head. So, one thing I'm going to try in this video is to take some maybe screenshots of interesting situations. Um, and I'll kind of paste them in this Google Doc and then we can return to them. So I still want to do most of the explaining live. I got the suggestion to maybe play the games ahead of time and then just review uh, the games in the board game arena replay feature, but the replay feature can be kind of finicky, and even like one wrong click can reset the whole thing. So, and the fast forward doesn't work very well. So I'd still like to just to do these live. I think it also kind of adds a little more, um, not authenticity, but it's more helpful to know what someone's thinking in the moment than when they can stare at the board for 10 minutes or something. So gonna keep doing it live, but gonna try to put some uh, controls in place to maybe help me not run out of time and have to make some plays quickly without thinking as much. So um, with that in mind, I also wanted to talk about um, kind of the mindset that you're in when you're playing. And I pulled up some game history from my main account. And what I want to highlight is this game here. I was at 715 ELO. And then you'll notice the next 3 games, I lose 3 in a row and drop from 715 all the way to 664. Um, so, when you're playing Azul, especially if you're kind of climbing the ranks or playing arena, so these other 2 games are arena games, but when you're playing arena and you can get matched with players much lower rating than you, I think sometimes we have a tendency to like underrate those players, and we can kind of autopilot or think we're just gonna win because we're better. But things happen, and if you're not focused, you can lose 19 ELO or 17 ELO in one go, and that really hurts when you're like at master or high in the expert ranks, because as you can see, like some of the wins get you 3 points or 2 points. So it was at this point that I stopped playing arena and started just playing experts only, or experts plus. But yeah, the main thing is like when you're playing, try to make sure you have the 10 or 15 minutes if you're playing a live game to give undivided attention. I used to like wake up in the morning and play while I brushed my teeth and made coffee, and I don't know how many times I thought I won a game, but then it turns out my opponent had a color bonus that I just didn't even see, because even like dividing your attention a little bit can cause you to miss things. So yeah, and if you're playing turn based, just make sure that you're, for me, when I see the little red dot telling me I have a play to make, I just want to go make that play no matter where I am or what I'm doing. And sometimes I just rush it. So make sure you're sitting with it, thinking about it, and giving the attention to the game that it deserves if you're trying to seriously climb. So okay, and then one more thing that I want to talk about, which is a strategy thing, and I'm going to pull up this game not specifically to show this game, but just to have a view of the board. So this is something I've kind of hesitated to really talk about, or I didn't end up putting this in the guide, but and the reason is because I still personally I don't think have the right understanding of how to balance this strategy. But we've talked about, when you pick a column in the first round, that we want to pick one of the three middle columns. And at some point, I was chatting with a fellow master and friend of mine, MajKey1988. So shout out to MajKey for being the first one to introduce me to this. But he kind of proposed that the second column is actually the best one to build. And obviously, like, it depends on the draw. So actually for this tile draw, for example, maybe you wouldn't want to build the second column. You want to take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of white and maybe build column 3 or 4. But let's talk about why the second column maybe has some advantages. So the first is that when you build the second column, you are building row 5 red. And if you assume that your opponent is going to build one of the other two middle columns, you'll notice that they're only going to want, 1 red or 2 red. Eventually they'll want both of them, but the idea is basically like you're somewhat unlikely to get into a significant battle for reds. So your row 5 is probably going to be easier to build. And if your opponent does decide to contest you on reds, it means that they are building on the edges and they're putting somewhat significant investments, 3 or 4 tiles, on the edges, which isn't always bad, but isn't as conducive to like getting adjacency bonuses as building in the middle is. So that's one thing, is lower competition for reds. And there's actually been a fair number of games where I build the second column and end up getting the red color bonus because it's just hard to defend them. So the other thing is, and maybe you've noticed this subconsciously or consciously, but in a lot of games in the last round, you might find yourself with 1 white tile remaining and row 1 white and row 2 white remaining. And this is not an uncommon thing. And the reason this happens is because white is the most sought after color if you assume both players are building one of the 3 center columns, right? So white has rows 3, 4, and 5. So there's heavy competition for whites, which is why often at the end of the game you find yourself with whites left over because both you and your opponent have spent them on rows 3 through 5. So the benefit of column 2 is that you need the fewest whites. So you're not going to be competing as heavily, especially like if you get the row 3 in round 1, for example. And you might say, okay, well, then you have to defend whites from your opponent. And, you said earlier that defending reds is hard because they're on the edges. And that's the thing with defending whites. You can fill your rows 1 and 2 early, but also if you end up being able to defend on row 4, like this is a nice tile for you to have. If you're defending on row 4, it means you've already built the row 4 black. So you're going to get adjacency here. And then, maybe at some point you get row 3 blue. So defending whites is like kind of building your board in a nice way, whereas defending reds generally builds your board in a way that detracts from it. So that's the story with building the second column. And I don't necessarily want you to always build the second column. But when I first learned of this, I actually did go on a streak of, I think, forcing it just to kind of see how it went. And it surprisingly worked very well. So um, the reason I don't wasn't sure about bringing this up is because I don't think I've figured out the balance myself for when to build the second column, even if it has like a subpar draw like this one maybe that we see in this game. But it's definitely something you're going to see that I'm going to prefer the second column when I feel like there's equality amongst the three, or maybe it's only slightly quote worse than the other two. So figured I should get that out of the way and just put that out there. You might see me prefer the second column, and next time it happens, we'll pay special attention to how my opponent tries to defend red, so we can see kind of that advantage playing out. Okay, so with that, let's dive into some games. We are 173 ELO after my unfortunate losses. So let's start by restricting to just average players, and we will see if we can get a quick game. If not, we will open it up to good players as well. Okay, so we've got an average player, and we'll start with the tile counts. Wow. Okay, so this is a super interesting board. There are no blues. 2, 4, 6. There are 8 yellows. 7 reds. 5 blacks, and there are no whites. So there are no blues or whites. So I've talked about in the past how I don't like to build on the edges. If there were ever a draw that was going to make me do it, it might be this one. But what I'm going to do is actually work on building the 4th and 5th row for column 2, like we just talked about. And then I'm going to try to use the yellows to fill out the top. So on yellow heavy draws, regardless of what else is going on, I like to build, just work on my top yellows. Because like I said, I don't really like investing on the edges where both row 4 and row 5 yellow are. So instead of like trying to build an edge column, I'll just build as much yellow in the top 3 rows as I can. So let's see what my opponent decides to do here. This is a tough choice for them. Just there are so many kind of good options for me. Like if they take 2 black here, I can take 3 yellow. If they take 2 red to defend my row 5, I can take 3 yellow. So this will be tough. If I were them, I would probably take that 1 yellow. And maybe play it on row 3 and then assume that I will take the 2 red and that they'll be able to take these other 2 yellow to finish their row 3. You could also take the 1 yellow and play it on row 1 and leave yourself some flexibility. They are either taking quite a while to think about this or forgot that they signed up for an Azul game. Let's just quickly make sure they're there. Okay, we don't want to skip them, so we can propose to switch to turn-based. and we will get a new game going, and I will, if that game ends up finishing, I will review it in a future video. Okay, we've got a new game. Much more normal draw this time, so 16 blues remaining, 14, 17, 17, 16. Okay, so like I said, when there's a lot of yellows, which there are in this draw, I like to try to build out the top rows. So this draw has like enough flexibility with the bottom rows. There's nothing really standing out here that I'm just going to take 3 yellow and close out my row 3. Okay, so my opponent takes 2 white. Now, kind of as we talked about, I'm going to maybe force column 2 a little bit here. So really my option is to take these 2 black and either play them on row 5 or row 4. And with row 5 or row 4. With row 5, like I could get these 2 white and start building this out. But there's also these 3 red. Okay, 2 blue. So there's not really a point in like trying to contest this 1 blue. My opponent can get it. However, I can force the 3 red to the middle by taking the 1 blue. So it's not so much that I'm like trying to prevent my opponent from finishing this, but by taking this, I'm gonna presumably control the reds, and okay, so I don't control the reds. My opponent opted not to take the blue. It actually puts me in an interesting situation, and I was about to say, like, not all opponents will take that blue there. They won't feel the need, because as you can see, like, now if I take the blue, I'm in kind of a weird situation where am I going to play it? So I should also note that I don't like this play from my opponent. It's setting them up to need blue for row 5. They also have this row 3 blue open, so they're really going to be starved for blue. I need to secure my row 2. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do this. This gives me some kind of adjacency points this round. And yeah, my opponent was going to leave me either with 1 black, which I like, or 3 reds, which I like. So either way, I come out doing well. And had they taken 3 reds, they probably would have had to play it on row 5, and they would have created a bad situation for themselves. And again, because I know it's hard to defend reds, I'm not too worried about like giving my opponent the opportunity to steal these from me. So 12, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12, 15, 11. Okay, so one situation we can see right away is we want these 2 blacks for our row 4. We want the 2 reds for our row 5. We have options on the 2 reds, so I'm not too worried about them. So the play that I'm going to make, because my row 5 is pretty flexible, is I'm actually just going to secure these 2 blues. My opponent wants 5 blue. and I'm pretty confident in my ability to get the other tiles I want. So I'm not going to stress too much about getting these rows. And so here, have some options. I could secure this one yellow and finish out my top 2 rows, secure the first player token, and ensure my nice adjacency. And I think I'm going to do that. And again, like, I'm not too worried about my rows 4 and 5 yet. I also have my eye on row 3, of course, for whites. And we'll see if my opponent tries to defend any of this. So they're in kind of a tough situation because of how their round 1 worked out. Okay, so they're going to try to defend the whites. So one thing I can do here is potentially pick up row 3 red if I can't get any of these whites. So I'm going to take these reds now. We'll see. Okay, so they just take that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is use this 1 black to put the 3 red in the middle. So my opponent is welcome to take those for row 2. They'll have to pay a little extra for them. They also could have prevented this black, which they chose not to do. So I'm just going to take the black, and I am happy either with row 3 red or getting the 2 whites towards my column. So either way, I'm going to be happy with the outcome. Now I have a decision to make. And let's see. So this is where having some tile counts comes in handy. So there's 11 whites left. So I feel pretty good. My opponent, could opt to build whites on row 4 or 5, but especially because I have the first player tile, I'm comfortable taking this red. And, I talked about like building red on the border not being great. But I have this yellow already, so there's some adjacency plays here, and maybe we'll get to see if we can build the full color. We're not going to go for it, but it might fall into our laps. So let's get our tile counts down. 11 red, 10, 1, 2, 3. So, okay, so kind of a tough draw for white. So there's 8 white left. And again, I think I'm not gonna try to force white. And I'm not gonna like necessarily defend this from my opponent. There's still kind of a long ways from a column, though they can make some significant damage towards column 4 because the yellows are here, the blues are here, and the whites are here. But I'm going to focus on trying to get basically the top 3 rows of the middle column. So I'm going to start with the red, secure my adjacency there. Yeah, and so I kind of expected this from my opponent, and the nice thing, oh, we'll see. The nice thing about this board with what they're trying to do is now they're going to get stuck on row 2 adjacency because there weren't enough reds, and obviously I'm going to take these. I have a somewhat interesting choice here. I could play those on row 4 and then contribute my these whites towards my row 3. But let's play it a little safer. We are up 4 points, and we have better column potential than our opponent does. And they're going to have, so most likely I will end up defending white in some way this round. So I can be pretty confident that they're going to have 2 open rows at least. And I will have the first player tile. So I should be able to do some damage next round. So I'm going to take the 2 yellow from the middle so that I don't give them the opportunity to combine these whites. And then I might be able to just, grab 1 white for defense. Another kind of sneaky option here. So if you think about like where our opponent can score in this round, still it's row 5 with whites, but it's also row 3 with blacks. And there's still 10 blacks. So that's quite a lot. And I'm going to make the choice to actually play these on row 5. So preventing them from scoring on row 3. And now the question is, is there any way in which I build the 2 middle columns together? I'm sorry, column 2 and column 3. And the answer is going to be no, right? There's only 8 white left. I would need all of them. So, but we have an opportunity to pivot columns. So I would need 1, 2, 3 blacks, 4, 5, 6 of the remaining 10. But my opponent doesn't need very many. So let's actually pivot to the, and our opponent's generous enough to give us this black. So like I said, we're up a lot score-wise. Let me quickly take these 2, 4, 6, 7. So there's 4 reds left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 blacks. 1, 2, 6 whites. Okay, so we're going to have an easy time getting our row 2 red. I'm going to make this play pretty quickly just to make sure I don't run out of time. And all right, let's value having the first player token heading into the last round. So we're overpaying for these reds, but they're going to be, having the first player token is going to be valuable. So I want to take a black to secure my row 1, but I'm going to do it by taking from this factory. And the reason is that I want to put reds in the middle because it's one of the few things that my opponent can still play. So now this situation is a lesson on the number of colors remaining and how it impacts who goes last. If all 5 colors are left on the board and you can get them in the middle on your turn, it means your opponent will go last. So the opportunity I have here is to take 1 white, put all 5 colors in the middle, and now I'm ensuring that my opponent gets these 4 reds, which are going to be damaging to them. So here it doesn't matter what I take. I'm just taking the lowest, one of the single tiles to reduce my negatives. They will probably take the 1 blue. Okay, so this is a mistake, right? Like I wasn't going to take 4 reds to prevent this. So they should have taken 1 blue. I would have taken 2 yellow, but instead they're going to end up, they could have had basically 2 more points because they would have had 1 blue here instead of 2 yellow. Okay, so we are up by 6. Nobody has a column yet. We have a shot at building 2 columns. We also have a shot at completing black, full color black. So we have lots of threats here, and threats are very important in Azul because even if they don't pan out, they can force your opponent's hand. Um, so I'm going to start with just completing my column, and I'm going to do it by putting a red in the middle so that, uh, my opponent needs these two red, and they wisely take it. But had they not, maybe I could have had an opportunity to dump them in the middle. So that's how I decided between, no, I guess both of the two whites had a red in them, so it didn't matter. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take row 3 black. And the reason I'm taking 3, even though 2 is better for me, this is going to force my opponent to take these 2 black, which they don't. So that's a miss on their part. So I'm going to benefit here from the full color. And notice, like, even if they had taken 3 black earlier in the round, I also have the threat of a second column from whites. So, this column pivot ended up working out nicely for us. We were able to create multiple threats. This is a just straightforward situation for us. We just take 1 white. So I typically don't like to pivot columns, but at the time, and given the tile counts of blacks and whites remaining, it felt relatively safe. Here we're just going to minimize negatives. So whenever you're in this situation, you want to look at what your opponent can play. So my opponent can only play red and black. So I can take this black and assume they will take the red, and then I can play the yellow. So, but what's fascinating here, and maybe I should screenshot this, is that this is actually a situation, yeah, and my opponent's going to do this correctly, I think. Nope, they're going to do it incorrectly. So my opponent should have taken the yellow and thrown them out. Why? So we're going to each be able to play these tiles and score 0 points. And so they took these reds and avoided negatives. But if you look at it, I already have some negatives. So they would have gone -2 if they took the yellows, but I would have gone -4 if when I had to take those reds. So although it's counterintuitive, the correct play for them was to take the reds. Let's see how this screenshot turned out. Yeah, so we'll go over that briefly. Oh no, okay, I'm good here. So like if they took these yellows, which they initially did, and played them, they'd get -2. And then I'm forced to take these reds for -4. So although it feels weird to throw away these yellows when you have this red spot open, because I already have tiles trashed, it's worse for me than it is for my opponent. So they would actually gain 2 points. So they'd go -2, I'd go -4, as opposed to a net gain of 0 when we both just play the tiles on our board. Okay, so you can kind of pause and maybe later. Okay, so that other game is in turn-based mode, so I'll finish that over time and review it. But let's do another game here. Okay, so this is a nice looking board for our row or our column 2 strategy, but I assume my opponent will take those 3 reds. And let's see where they play them. So, okay, row 3. or yep, row 3. Um, so I'm going to play off the fact that they are potentially building this fifth column. And I know that I've said that I like to have the first player token entering the second round, but one blue is, I don't like building on the edges, which isn't great. I know I did it last game, but um, I'd prefer not to. So I'm going to actually take some yellows and try to kind of prevent them from getting this row 4 yellow. And because there's 3 yellows remaining, I feel pretty safe about playing them on row 3 as opposed to row 2. Okay, 2 white. So this was another thing that contributed to the decision to take the yellows. Like putting a double in the middle is not great because most likely your opponent will take it, but they're now like really far. Their row 2 and row 3 are on opposite ends of the board, so it's not great for their adjacency potential. Now, I'm just going to take a yellow here to close this out so I don't end up in a situation where I'm forced to take one later. But I am going to take the one or one of the ones without the blue because I don't want to group these 2 blue yet. My opponent potentially wants them for row 5, but I might want them for row 4 if I decide to continue on this 4th column, which is looking pretty nice actually. So I can potentially get the 2 blue. There's 3 whites remaining. I will remain flexible on my row 4 and 5. There's good potential here for all of them, honestly. Okay, so 1 blue puts us in a bit of an interesting situation. Let's see. Okay, so I do want to put some tiles in the middle so that I can eventually secure my row 2. Like if I take from the center and then they take from the center, I think it'll work out that I can ultimately still secure row 2, but I'm going to take 1 red for my row 1. And what this does is allows me to next turn take something from this remaining factory, and there will either be 2 black or 2 yellow or 2 red still available. So I'm guaranteeing that I will be able to fill my row 2. Oh, 1 yellow is fascinating. Okay, so they are looking at this column, the first column now. So obviously they want this yellow and they want to snatch up 2 red. What I'm going to do is take the 2 white and I think just continue on my column 4. And I'm guessing that I will end up with 2 black for my row 2. Though if they take 1 red, so if I take this 2 white and play it on row 4 or 5 and they take this singular red, then I'm kind of in trouble for my row 2. So I'm actually going to scrap what I just said. And let's take this 1 yellow to hurt their row 5. And I'm guessing they'll take the 2 red, and then I'll grab the 2 black for my row 2. And then, oh wow, 3 white. Okay, so you guys know by now that I think this is a mistake to have your row 4 and 5 misaligned if they are both incomplete, which we know they will be, right? They can't finish either of these rows, so they're going to have an incomplete, mismatched row 4 and 5. So now we have a decision. And what I'm thinking here is actually like I don't want to be competing with them on white. So um, maybe I will build column 2, but to keep it simple for now, I'm going to just take these reds. And yeah, let's build the column that requires the least whites. Now, there have been a lot of red played, so there's 6 reds, so I am aware that my column 5 or my row 5 might be difficult here. Um, but I like the thought of building column 2 here. And let's see how this goes with my opponent defending reds, which it doesn't look like they're going to have to do much of in this round. Bit of bad luck here for my opponent. There's only 1 blue, which means that they can't possibly get row 2 adjacency. A lot of black. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 whites. Okay. So this is the danger of building on the edge, right? Like obviously this is a really bad circumstance. There should have been, by probability, more blues this round, but there aren't, so they're in trouble. So let's see what we want to do here. And I think I want to stay relatively flexible. So there's a world in which like I don't get row 3 white and I could get row 3 black instead. I don't want that to be the case, but I'm just going to start by finishing this column out finishing this row out instead of starting to work on row 3 white, which I could have by taking a tile from the center. Okay, so they do that. I am happy here to take the first player token and complete my row 3. And I'm not worried about them having this because I'm going to take one of these yellows or both of them potentially, depending on what they do, for my row 1. And so I know they're not going to be able to finish this. So I could have like defended those yellows here. But I think I'm going to end up in pretty good shape this round. And maybe that is actually something to consider. Do I want to give them the opportunity to take 2 red? Let's do something interesting and just start building row 5 red. So I don't want to give that. I want to put them in pressure on row 2, basically. And if I took that yellow, I would have put 2 red in the middle and let them, kind of get away with it for free. But so now we will simply take this, and we don't have to be too worried about our row 2 because we have black and white open. And basically what's going to happen here is this is a situation where both of us will only be able to take row 2 black after I take this red. So either I will get row 2 or neither of us will get row 2. So I've talked about prioritizing rows 1 and 2, but if you can create the situation where your opponent doesn't get it either, then it's net 0, right? Like it's fine that you didn't get it because your opponent also didn't get it. I think I should have spent more time considering using row 2 yellow for my first move instead of the row 4 black, because there was a lot of black available and only the 4 yellow available. So ideally I probably should have taken those yellows. So again, this is a situation where I need to slow down and think about the game a little bit more instead of talking as much perhaps. So I might try to like decide on my play ahead of time and then talk about the scenario. So that was something I was gonna do this video that I haven't been holding to. Okay, so I could take this black, but I want to remain flexible next round, so I'm not gonna put that there. So I'll take the -1. Okay, so we're tied at 6 apiece. Lots of blue, not a lot of yellow, not a lot of red. Okay, so I am going to take the yellow here. So when I think about my goals for this round, I'm basically going to force my opponent to spend on this one yellow. And I'm looking at creating row 3 blue. An alternative is to look at row 4 blue and row 3 black. So one thing you can think about, depending on your board structure, is like what is the optimal spot for this combination of tiles? And my board really, like I have 2 spots for black. It's row 1 and row 3. I have a lot of spots for blues, and neither of them are that bad for me. So there's some idea of like, although row 3 blue is nice for this adjacency, if I play this row 3 blue, then all these black tiles are going to go somewhere, who knows where, maybe to my opponent. Whereas if I can play row 4 blue, then I have a spot for the black tiles, and I'm getting, both row 3 and row 4. Whereas if I take row 3 blue, I'm not going to complete my row 4. So just something to think about. Let us take this one black and secure our top row adjacency. This gives us we could, go for blue for adjacency, but this, leaves us flexibility for row 3 and row 4 blue. We could actually, in some crazy world, do both of them, but it's, obviously my opponent's going to try to stop that. One nice thing about this draw that I didn't plan, but this is something you can try to plan, is that my opponent wants this singular blue for their row 2. So when there's a red in the middle, if they take the singular blue, I get my 2 red that I really want. So I didn't plan this, but in some, alternate round, maybe I noticed that the only singular blue is attached to a red. So I purposely put one red in the middle so that it benefits me when they take it. So let's see what they do here. My opponent has some nice stuff. Like they could, in theory, get row 2 blue and row 3 white. They opt for a red. That is sort of smart of them. So they're making it so, it's harder for me to do this, but it is going to cost them in that I'm going to attach the only single blue to these other 2. So, now they're paying a little bit extra. They could just play row 3 blue, which isn't bad. And let's see if they do it. They do it. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this out. They will most likely take one of these blues, and I'm going to end up with a pretty nice situation here as well. Depending on what they do, most likely, okay, so this is a weird move. Okay, most likely I am going to end up with that row 3 black and potentially some row 4 white action, which will play in nicely should I end up getting more blues. And, part of the reason I was willing to pass on row 3 blue is that there's 10 blues left. So I need 6 of them, 6 of the 10 remaining, but my opponent most likely isn't going to be taking very many more blues. Okay, so what do I want to do here? I want to stick my opponent with the last tiles. And do I need to do that? Let's think. I could take the 2 blues and basically force my opponent into these 3 blacks, which is really bad for their column situation, because then they need to build 5 reds, and there's only 7 reds left. And I have first player, so that could be good. And then I'll be left with the 3 whites, and I will start building this center column, not for the point of, building the whole column, but for the point of getting really nice point scoring from this blue and this white. So my opponent now needs 5 reds and then the additional 2 red if they want to finish their row 2. So that's all 7 remaining reds. Three of which came out this round. 4. I should also mention, actually, my opponent needs row 3 white as well. So we kind of forced them to pivot to a bad column, or they would have taken these big negatives. Okay, so what do we want to do here? There's 5 blues left, and we know we want a decent amount of blues, but we also know we want to stop our opponent from being able to build this column. So we can have black for adjacency or blue, and let me think on it. And notice I'm not considering trying to actually build this center column because there's only 4 black left, so that ends up being kind of tough. And it's going to put me in a situation where I have lots of open rows. Okay, so I'm going to take the black. This should give us an opportunity to hurt our opponent next round by leaving them with an open row. I think my opponent should have taken this 1 yellow and dumped these blues into the center, so that, because then I would have to, if I wanted to get 1 here and 1 here, I would need to take a big chunk of blues, but now I don't need to do that. Okay, so we're just going to focus on our own building here. Like, let's just knock these rows out. We're up by 6. We have the first player token. We're going to get our completed column. So, okay, so we know our opponent needs these reds, but is there any reason really to throw these reds away? So if we think about it, our opponent is going to need 3 whites to finish this column. We have the first player token. We need white for row 1 and row 2. So I'm willing to give my opponent these reds because I'm reasonably confident they're not going to be able to finish that column anyway. Okay, so they take blues, which forces me to go -8 here, versus playing those blues for me and them playing the reds. So we're actually in like a interesting end game, and we are down by 5, but we are going to complete a column, which our opponent isn't going to do. So we do want to be very mindful of the math here. And we've got some good things going for us, I suppose. We have flexibility on our row 3 for reds or blacks. So we should be able to secure one of those. And our opponent, can score here, but this is a 2-point play at the moment, so not very powerful. Okay, so the play that I'm going to make, I'm just going to take 2 white, which will basically force my opponent to take 2 white. I also do want to end the game this round, so we're not. I said we need to be mindful of the math, and I'm kind of glossing over it, but like we have a 9-point play with this blue, and a column for +7. And if you just look at like where our opponent can score, we're also getting additional points here. So we're outscoring them on row 1. We're outscoring them on row 2. They can score on row 4, but it's 2 points, and they're not getting a column. So even with like relatively simple math, we can see that we're coming out ahead here. Okay, I'm going to make a play that keeps me flexible here. So I'm taking this 1 blue, and basically what I'm doing is just combining these reds into a group of 5 so that my opponent has to pay really dearly for playing them on row 2. And, I'm forcing them to take the first player token. And now I don't have to rush into taking these 5 red for my row 3, which I will do eventually because they aren't going to play them, right? So I need to take these 2 blue, force them into these yellow or into, minus a trillion. And we will get some nice points from these reds, and we should be comfortably ahead when all is said and done. So although we went into this round behind, we put our opponent in a position earlier in the game where we made it really hard for them to build a column. And had they made this decision last round to play these 3 blue on their row 5 instead of the 3 red, and it cost us some negatives. But they would have been in at least a slightly better situation maybe, though it would have been tough for them regardless. So, okay. Let's do one more, and we are 226 now, so we will do good players. Oh, I thought I had unchecked that earlier. So that was a game where our opponent played very defensively in ways that hurt their own board more than ours, right? So they took those blues to force us to take those reds as negatives, but in reality, those blues kind of sealed the deal for the game where we were more or less guaranteed to get a column, and they were more or less guaranteed not to get a column. Actually, I think legitimately guaranteed not to get a column. All right, so we're having some trouble getting a good player. I don't really want to open it up to strong players. That would be, even more kind of disingenuous. I don't want to have a 390 play a 226 that's actually a 700. So I'd prefer to stay close to my rating range. But if we don't get someone soon, maybe we can just open it up to average players again instead of to strong players. Okay, let's keep it open to average, I guess. Okay, so we got an average player. Okay, so our opponent makes the play that I would play, which is building on this second column with reds. Let's give them some trouble with it. So let's take these two reds. If I were them, I would take 2 yellow on row 2. Okay, so they take it for row 3. Not bad. Let's do something interesting. Let's see if we can force them into taking the 2 yellow. Okay, so they don't. So now we have an interesting decision of what to do with these yellows. Do we want to play them, take them just to prevent our opponent? What column are we going to build? Let's take them and give our opponent some trouble. Okay, and now we will stay flexible. Do we want to stay flexible? So, we can give our opponent either row 5 red, let them complete it. But if we do that, we are going to give them row 4 black, 3 row 4 blacks, which is good, which is strong. But let's put them in a situation where they're really stuck with 3 open. Oh, fascinating. So my opponent might be assuming that I don't want these blacks, but I very much do. And I'm going to play them on row 5, and we'll build the center column. This is good for me because, oh, wow. Okay. I was going to say we won't have to compete for white because my opponent will be stuck on row 3, but actually they're going to compete for white on row 4. So 2 blues. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they took 2 whites, so there were 5 total. Okay, so we don't really need to worry about finishing our row 5 black. We probably don't need to worry about finishing our row 3 yellow. So we're gonna make a defensive play here and take the 2 reds. So these are the only 2 reds. They work nicely for our adjacency on row 1, and they stop our opponent. Okay, so 4 black in the middle. Now there's 2 kind of schools of thought here. we can try to set up a situation where our opponent ends up taking those blacks, which we could do. So because there's only 4 colors remaining, we can put 4 of them in the middle and ensure that our opponent isn't able to leave us with the last tiles. So I'll save this for later so we can talk about it. But because they're at 1 point, I don't care about dumping negatives on them, right? Like it's just going to put them to 0 instead of 1, or 2, whatever they score this round. So in this case, it's actually better to take these and build out our board instead of trying to give our opponent a bunch of negatives. So we'll see how many points these blacks get us in the future. Maybe it won't be that much, but and then what I'm going to do here is I don't want that black, so I'm just going to take this yellow. And if our opponent does what they just did, we'll be able to prevent them from getting their row 2. So they take the black, they play it. I would opt to throw that away. We, of course, take the single tile instead of the double tile. So, I think my opponent is... sorry, let me do the tile counts real quick. Our opponent's kind of like playing things a bit randomly. They're kind of all over the board. So we're going to have some flexibility maybe in which column we actually end up building. But let's secure our black. Like the other benefit of playing that row 4 black, even if it doesn't score as many points, is like there are 8 red remaining, so there is a world in which we could pivot to the second column instead of this one. I don't suspect we will do that, but it could happen. Okay, so let's play this black for our adjacency and kind of force our opponent's hand on row 2. Okay, they don't go for it. Instead opting for row 3 blue. So this is a situation where like I have so many options. I'm basically guaranteed row 2 yellow because my opponent can't play yellow. So I have relatively few scoring priorities right now. So I will just take this black and throw it away. So this is a case where I do advocate for the defensive play, preventing our opponent from row 2 in a situation where we don't need offense is fine for us. So we do kind of have this decision of which column do we want to end up building. This is kind of an interesting situation, and I think I'm going to continue to leave it up to some flexibility. So I kind of want to put some blues together, but I think I'm just going to take this one yellow. Okay, so my opponent takes a blue. So I'm going to take the yellow that does not put the 3 white in the middle, since that's just giving our opponent a free 3 white. And now we have the opportunity to prevent that. So there's 10 blues left. That's a lot. There's 8 whites left. We would need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. Our opponent already has a lot of white. Yeah, the decision here is basically which of these 2 middle columns to build. And certainly I'm going to take this 1 white. It's just a question of, do I play it on row 4 or do I play it on row 3? If you notice, our opponent won't have row 2 or 3 red open, and that you're not really going to want to play red on row 4. So I have a decent shot at the 5 red, um, as opposed and just needing the 3 white, as opposed to needing 3 blue and 3 more white. Actually, not a super straightforward decision here. I guess we know we're going to take the white, so we can just do that. Yeah, our opponent has a hard time playing blue also. And we can build the row 5 red regardless. So let's do this. We do have a shot at full color black. There are enough tiles left for it. We need 5 of the remaining 6. That's a lot of red. 1, 2, 3 blacks. And they took 1 white. Okay, so there's 5 white left. All right, so what do we want to do here? We know we're not going to finish out this white. We have a decent shot at working on this row 5 red. We know we want row 3 blue, though we don't completely need it. There's still 4 blue left. So let's secure our row 1. So this is a situation where having tile counts, certainly helps. Like, it's kind of like I talked about at the beginning of the video. We're really going to be starved for white at the end. We're going to need 1, potentially 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's only 5 remaining. So we're probably going to be giving up on finishing out our full row 2. So what's my opponent doing? They kind of want blacks, actually. This is their most likely scenario. There's only 3 remaining, and I have the starting tile next round. So let's basically secure our row 3 blue. We'll have options to finish it. Also worth noting, like, we're up 14-0. So always keep in mind the score, and like, it's not the end of the world if we don't build a column in this game, because we're up by 2 columns already. So we can just point our way to victory. So here, if you guys have been watching the series, you can probably guess what I'm going to do, but I see that my opponent needs this 1 red, and I can take something that helps me while also grouping the remaining reds to hurt them. So of course I'm going to do that. This has the added effect of, they needed row 1 red as well, or yellow. So that kind of forced their hand on row 1 yellow, which they also had to pay extra for. And now I can pretty safely grab this red, which gives me flexibility in the next round as to how I want to build a column. Now I do have a kind of interesting decision here. Do I want this white for my column, or do I want to get this black for row 2? And I think because I'm ahead in points, and because I have the threat of full color black, so there's 3 blacks left and I need 3 of them, I can secure this row 2 black and be in a potentially good situation. Yeah, and so we're up by 20. Yeah, I should have noted there were only 2 red remaining. Now the question is, do we want to take them? they're worth good points for us actually. This is a 4 point play. So this black tile from round two, not terrible. Um, so let's do this. We'll get some whites in the middle. And I'm actually like not gonna monkey around with columns here. I'm just gonna end the game, right? So I'm up by 20. Um, so instead of leaving things in a potentially weird situation, um, let's just end this. Okay, so in this situation, if I take anything from a factory, I'm gonna eat 6 yellow. So instead, I'll eat 2 yellow now. Most likely my opponent takes a white. Yeah. And then I will take 1 blue. They'll dump this white. I dump the 1 blue, and then they get the 4 yellows. So I still dumped a lot of tiles in doing that, but not 6 of them, only 5 of them. So we came out ahead. So an example of just like we just built in a more strategic way than our opponent did, and despite not building a column, we threatened to build columns throughout. Our opponent made defensive decisions around whites that ended up putting them in a tough spot. So and then we just scored well. So 37-7. Now there was a screenshot that I took here about that round two situation, and I should have captured the score in the screenshot as well. But basically the thought here was I could set up a scenario where I forced my opponent to take all these blacks. And the way that would have worked is I would basically take a blue, I could have taken even like the 2 blacks. So let's say I take these 2 blacks for my row 5. That's going to put 4 colors in the middle. And whenever there are 4 colors in the middle and all 4 of them, or rather the remaining factory has those colors or fewer. So in this case, it's all of the 4 remaining colors, but let's say this was 2 blacks or 2 blues or just blues and yellows. If you can get 4 colors in the middle when the 5th color is not present, then there's basically no way your opponent can force you to be the last player. So if there's like a yellow in the middle here, no matter what my opponent takes, I will either have the opportunity to, let's say I put a yellow in the middle, and then they take the white. I can take this white, and they'll be stuck with the blacks. Or if they take the yellow, I take the yellow. Basically, you take whatever they don't take. However, in this situation, because it was round 2 and they have 0 points and they're not going to score, I think they had 1 point at the time, and I can see from their board they're not going to score like 10 points this round. I have very little incentive to dump negatives on them. So instead of dumping negatives on them, I just improved my own board and took those blacks. Okay, so good set of games today. And we are up to 243 ELO. Interesting. I thought I had gotten that one already. And I'll finish out this game. There was that one situation in an earlier game where I felt like maybe I should have taken 2 yellows on row 2, but other than that, I think played fairly well. Still working on how to play and explain, talk, and not use up too much time all at once. So thanks for sticking with me, and hope you enjoyed the video.